Picture this. You kiss your wife goodbye. You hug your 2 young children. You walk out the door to go to work. And you never come home again. Not for 46 years. Not because you died, but because the system designed to protect you destroyed you instead. This is Richard Phillips. And this is the story of how America stole half a century from an innocent man. Detroit, 1971. Richard Phillips was 25 years old. He had calloused hands from honest work at Chrysler. He had a wife who loved him. He had 2 children who ran to the door when Daddy came home. He had dreams. And then, in one moment, it all turned to ash. Phillips was arrested for the murder of Gregory Harris. A man he'd never met, a crime he knew nothing about. But innocence was about to become irrelevant. My wife, she looked at me through that glass at the jail, and I could see in her eyes. She was trying to believe me, but the doubt was creeping in. That's when I knew my life was over. The real killer, Fred Mitchell, didn't just murder Gregory Harris. He murdered Richard Phillips too, just in a different way. Mitchell walked into that courtroom and looked Phillips in the eye as he lied. Every word was a knife. Mitchell had beaten Harris to death with a pipe because Harris was stealing his mother's Social Security checks. But instead of confessing, Mitchell chose to destroy 2 innocent lives to save his own worthless skin. When that gavel fell, it didn't just convict Richard Phillips, it buried him alive. I watched my lawyer's face when they read guilty. Even he looked shocked. That's when I realized nobody was coming to save me. Imagine watching your children grow up through letters that come less and less frequently. Imagine your wife visiting, then remarrying, then disappearing forever. Imagine your parents aging and dying while you rot in a cage for something you didn't do. My daughter, she stopped writing when she turned 16. She told me later she was ashamed to tell her friends her father was in prison. Can you imagine? My own child was ashamed of me for something I didn't do. Year after year, appeal after appeal, denied. The system that had already failed him once kept failing him over and over. 20 years passed, then 30, then 40. He watched fellow inmates die, some from old age, some from violence, some from the simple, crushing weight of hopelessness. But Phillips painted. In a world of concrete and steel, Phillips created color. In a place designed to break the human spirit, he painted hope. These weren't just paintings. They were prayers. Some nights I'd paint until my fingers bled. Because when I was painting, I wasn't in that cell. I was free. It was the only freedom they couldn't take from me. Every brushstroke was an act of rebellion against a system that had tried to erase him. Every landscape was a window to a world he might never see again. He painted his children as he remembered them, young, innocent, loving their father. He never got to paint them as adults. He never got to meet his grandchildren. 46 years of birthdays, Christmases, graduations, stolen. In 2010, after 3 decades of imprisonment, a miracle happened. But for Phillips, who was now 66 years old, even miracles felt cruel. When we realized Richard had been in prison for over 30 years for something he didn't do, I went home and cried. This wasn't just an injustice. This was torture. Richard Palumbo, Phillips' co-defendant, finally told the truth. Fred Mitchell had framed them both because he and Phillips looked similar. 30 years later, the real story emerged. But truth came with a bitter taste. Where were these revelations when Phillips was 30? When he was 40? When he was 50? Why did justice have to wait until an old man had already lost everything? December 14, 2017. Richard Phillips walked out of prison at 72 years old. The world had moved on without him. Technology he couldn't understand. A society that had forgotten him. Children who were strangers. The system failed him. Nothing that I can say will bring back years of his life spent in prison. They gave me back my life. But it wasn't my life anymore. It was the shell of a life. Everyone I loved was gone. Phillips had to learn how to use a smartphone. He had to learn about the internet. He had to learn how to live in a world that had spent 46 years without him. His wife had remarried and died. His children were strangers with children of their own. I wanted to tell her I was innocent. I wanted to say I'm sorry for all the pain, but all I had was a headstone. The state eventually paid him $1.5 million. Sounds like a lot? That's about $32,000 per year of wrongful imprisonment, less than minimum wage, less than most people spend on their cars. The same paintings that kept him sane in prison now keep him alive in freedom. Ironic that his suffering has become his livelihood. Each canvas tells the story of a man who refused to let the system break his soul. People ask me how I'm not angry, how I'm not bitter. You want to know the truth? I am angry. I'm furious. But what good would it do? Being angry won't bring back my wife, won't give me back my children's childhood. Think about what Phillips lost. Not just 46 years, but 46 years of everything that makes life worth living. First steps he never saw, graduations he missed, weddings where his chair sat empty, grandchildren who don't know his name. Fred Mitchell, the real killer, lived free for decades. He never faced justice for Gregory Harris's murder. He watched his own children grow up. He attended his own parents' funerals. He lived the life he stole from Richard Phillips. Phillips wasn't the only victim. His children grew up without a father. His wife lived with the shame and whispers. His parents died believing their son was a murderer. An entire family was destroyed by one man's lie. I spent my whole childhood lying about where my father was. I told people he was dead because it was easier than explaining. I grieved for a father who was alive but unreachable. According to the National Registry of Exonerations, over 3,400 people have been wrongfully convicted since 1989. They've lost a collective 31,000 years of freedom. That's 31,000 years of stolen birthdays, missed funerals, and broken families. How many Richard Phillips are sitting in cells right now? How many innocent people are painting their pain away, writing letters to children who've forgotten them, marking time until death or exoneration, whichever comes first. Today, Richard Phillips lives alone in a 3-bedroom house. He paints every day. Not because he has to anymore, but because it's all he knows. At 78, he's outlived his wife, watched his parents die from prison, and reconnected with children who are essentially strangers. I paint my family the way I remember them, young, happy, before the system broke us all. He forgives a system that doesn't deserve forgiveness. He finds hope in a world that showed him none. He creates beauty in a life that knew nothing but ugliness for 46 years. Richard Phillips spent 16,801 days in prison for a crime he didn't commit. That's 16,801 days of injustice. 16,801 days of a system that claims to seek truth, but settled for lies. 16,801 days that history will judge us for. His story isn't just about one man's suffering. It's about our collective failure. Every day Richard Phillips sat in that cell, we all sat in judgment, and we all failed the test. How do you give a man back 46 years? How do you apologize for stealing someone's entire life? You can't. All you can do is promise it will never happen again. But promises are just words. And Richard Phillips has heard enough lies for one lifetime.